Let's go around Major League Baseball. The odds outlook in both of the pennant races live right here on this Thursday on the early line on SportsGrid. Most of the midweek sets have come to a close. A fourth and final game today in Los Angeles between the Dodgers and their rivals from up north, the San Francisco Giants. In returning for the Dodgers on the bump today, Clayton Kershaw, a familiar face, is back in L.A. So, DRS, when we entered the All-Star break with the week prior, the Philadelphia Phillies sweeping Los Angeles in the city of brotherly love, and the Dodgers entered the break dropping 8 of their last 11, it looked as though Philly had made its statement. It was the top team in the National League, and it closed the gap from the odds perspective with L.A. Well, the Phils have lost both of their sets since returning from the All-Star break, and the Dodgers have won 5 of 6 games. Now that gap a little bit wider at the top, plus 150 for the Dodgers, plus 210 for the Phils. The Braves had a plus 450 price earlier this week, backed by a bucket, plus 550.
Yeah, and again, these prices are going to change. We have to understand it's not really a spot here based on where these teams are in the standings. Otherwise, it would just go odds repeated. Who's in first, who's in second, who's in third, and the odds would be accordingly here. We're anticipating, again, just under now, feels like a week out of that trade deadline. What are we going to get? Because that's going to change those numbers quite a bit as opposed to what's actually taking place on the field now. And you might ask like that, Donnie, that doesn't make any sense. Why would it not be what's on the field? It's projections of what these two teams will look like in the standings at the end of September heading into October baseball. What are these rosters going to look like? Is Clayton Kershaw going to come back and say, hey, you know, I pitched 2 games, I just don't have it anymore, and hang them up at this point? Are the Dodgers going to go out and get a Tarek Skubal at the trade deadline? Because that will shift odds, no doubt about it, regardless of anything that takes place on the diamond here. So that's what I'm waiting for to watch. I don't disagree with how these two teams are shaping up. And I also told you, Ben, last week when the Phillies swept the Dodgers, what are you taking out of it? Yeah, it's great. The Phillies will probably end up the number 1 overall seed, but the Phillies aren't going to take on these B-level pitchers in the playoffs. You're going to get frontline starters that we expect to be either healthy or traded onto that Dodgers roster. So I don't have any complaints with the way that sits with the Dodgers up top at a plus 150.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good point there, DRS, as well. Philadelphia did lose its only series following the Dodgers before the All-Star break, but the Phils still have a 3.5-game advantage over L.A. at this moment for that best record in the National League. There are 3 teams around MLB that have won more than 60 games this year. The Phillies with 64, the Dodgers now with 61, and the Guardians in the American League, 61 wins. We'll talk AL pennant prices in just a moment. What is also very compelling in the NL is the wild card race. The Mets sweeping the subway set for the season overall, but this week over the Yankees, now in that second spot in the National League wild card standings. The Mets only a game and a half behind the Braves, who are on a 4-game skid, having lost 7 of their last 10. So when you put the Braves and the Mets, but we'll separate there just a game and a half, the Cardinals and the Padres currently tied for the third and final National League wild card spot. The Redbirds were blanked yesterday by the Buccos in Pittsburgh. There are 5 teams right now, Donnie, for the final 2 wild card spots in the 3 sitting outside currently, or the 2 sitting outside because the Padres and the Cardinals are tied, all separated by just a game and a half. That's the Mets, Cardinals, Padres, D-backs, Pirates. 5 teams battling for the final 2 wild card spots, only separated by just a game and a half, now past the 100-game point of this Major League Baseball campaign.
Yeah, and you probably would take it as low. Let's just say if the season ended today, right? Again, it would be the Braves, Mets, and the Cardinals that would make it into the playoffs. But some teams are close. You probably would go down to and say legitimate chance. The San Francisco Giants at 4.5 games back. They still have some pretty good frontline starting pitching, a decent lineup, as long as their organization, I haven't heard any of this, by the way, that they're going to be sellers at the deadline. I don't think that's the case. Cubs, Nationals, Rockies, Marlins, you can put them to bed at this point. So I do think there's a lot of teams that are going to be up for it. Also, the Pittsburgh Pirates, we've talked about it so many times. Just keep that young core core intact throughout the rest of the season, don't shut anybody down, quite frankly, they probably are going to make the playoffs. But I think the biggest jump here is now that we've told you all season long, the Atlanta Braves are still a quality ball club. They're just really injured right now. Love the front office.
Yeah.
Let's see what type of changes they make. And the reason is because sometimes, Ben, you don't actually look at the standings. You just make that say, I know the Braves are struggling, but they're still going to be there at the end and maybe the third best overall team in the National League. Then you look at the standings and say, wait a second, in the wild card, 2-game lead over the Mets, again, over the Cardinals.
Yeah.
They're right in it. You talk about the Braves losing the next 3 out of 4 games and possibly being fighting for their wild card lives. That's something that I would have anticipated unless I'm looking directly at the standings themselves. And the reason I want to bring up the Braves too is I've told you time and time again, I love that front office. They usually make the right sound decisions at the right moment. Mm-hmm. They're probably understanding the same thing we are. Like, yes, there's a chance the Braves can make a run, but what are we actually doing as a Braves franchise at the deadline? Because I've told you, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think they can do damage. And we're relying on Chris Sale being unbelievable and a Cy Young award-winning pitcher, something we didn't see coming into the year. The same thing with Ronaldo Lopez. Let's just say if one of them stays, like Sale might win the Cy Young, but Lopez falls off. Are we making moves next week at the deadline to sort of trade away prospects to get a number 3 and a number 4 pitcher to say, you know what, let's get into the playoffs knowing that we probably won't win it? I'm really interested to see what they do at the deadline, Ben.
The Brewers extending the gap in the National League Central, a 6-game lead. It does stand out to me that both San Diego and Arizona have a more optimistic odds outlook than the Mets and the Cardinals, who are the 2 teams in the wild card spots right now. The Padres tied with St. Louis for that 3rd and final. The Dodgers have won 5 of 6 since returning from the All-Star break, starting to get healthier. Tyler Glass now, despite a loss yesterday, back. Clayton Kershaw makes his season debut, year number 17 in Los Angeles today in 2024. Mookie Betts will be back. Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And as Donnie has mentioned, they can always make a move at the deadline. 61 and 42 to get to 100 wins plus 170. The Dodgers have won at least 100 games in each of the last 4 full seasons in Major League Baseball. Clayton Kershaw makes his season debut today against the Giants. Year number 17. He is now 36 years old. He was darn good last year in the regular season. Only postseason outing, just a third of an inning of work. Got shelled by the D-backs. Now to the American League. Up next. National League pennant prices now to the American League. The Yankees are still the favorites to win the American League pennant. Is it justified with how the Yankees have played since the middle of June? Capped off this week by a Subway Series and season sweep against the New York Mets. Not the Yankees sweeping, but the Yankees being swept. They lost all 4 games against their in-city foe in the Amazons this season. And, Donnie, we highlighted this earlier on. From the start of the first Subway set back at Citi Field in Queens at the end of June, the Yankees are now 8-16 after being swept once again by the Mets this week. Meanwhile, the New York Mets, much more of an optimistic outlook, 15-9 from that point. What has to happen for the Yankees to not be booked as the favorites anymore in the American League pennant, a place they have been pretty much since the opening week of the year?
The Orioles have to start running away with the division, but they're not helping out in that aspect. You start to say to yourself, you're in striking distance. It's 1.5 today, right? Is the distance between the Baltimore Orioles and the New York Yankees. You know what has to happen?
Yeah.
3 games, 4 games, 5 games, 6 games. And they say, oh, wow, how about this? The Yankees are going to have to go the wild card route without home field advantage. Yes, but also, we're taking a look at the trade deadline coming up, and I think a lot of these prices are going to be held over because the one thing I keep continuously saying, this isn't bad right now for the Yankees. Donnie, what do you mean? Like, wouldn't they rather be in first? Of course they would rather be in first place, but you get so much pressure, and that's a pressure-cooking environment to be a New York Yankees team just getting shelled by the New York Mets and now falling back in the standings, and nothing is going right. The front office, which is basically Brian Cashman, he can't just say, we'll work this out in August and September. We have the guys to do it in this locker room. That's not the case. And also, yesterday was a big game. Same way I talk about the Philadelphia Phillies, right? Coming out of the break. Let me just see what Zach Wheeler's going to do, regardless of wins or losses. Looked really good in that start. He'll probably be back to being Zach Wheeler the rest of the way. No worries here. We were waiting on that for Garrett Cole yesterday. That was a game yesterday for Garrett Cole. 7 innings pitched, 100 pitches, 1 earned run, and a victory. And even if they didn't win, let's say the bullpen blew up late in the game, you say, it doesn't matter. Garrett Cole looks like he found what we needed him to find. And now if we can just get Luis Gil to perform at a high level, Rodon to be average, we'll go out at the break. And you know what we'll do as well? We'll add on another pitcher. But you saw yesterday where I said, I wish I had I can hit the bells and whistles on my computer here, because those alarm bells are starting to go off. Because if you don't have Garrett Cole back as an efficient pitcher down the stretch, I don't think the Yankees can win. And I was basing a lot of that, Ben, on my theory. Still, I'm still trusting the Yankees. I'm still trusting the Yankees because, number one, I think they'll make moves. But number two, I was just expecting Garrett Cole just to be back to being, I don't need Cy Young Garrett Cole, but just give me the 2.75, 2.85 ERA Garrett Cole, and we'll be just fine. The one I saw yesterday, that is going to be really a struggle. If you don't have good Garrett Cole down the stretch, again, I'm not sure the Yankees can win it.
That's the optimism for the Yankees, I think, still being booked as the pennant favorites. Yes, there are players that are injured for the Yanks in their offensive lineup, but moves have to be made. And if you're baking in a price as a favorite for expected moves at the deadline, that's not really a team that I think you have the confidence in betting. As we compare the Yankees and the Orioles, for the second time in the weeks surrounding the All-Star break, Baltimore is squandering opportunities to extend its lead and maybe run away with the American League East division. In the final week before the All-Star break, the Yanks and the O's played in that final weekend set. The Yankees won 2 of 3. The Orioles won the finale to take a 1-game lead into the break. But before that, the Yankees lost a midweek set to Tampa. The Orioles had to play the lowly Cubs, who were struggling. They got swept at home in Camden Yards. Okay, the Yankees swept this week by the Mets in a short 2-game set in the Subway Series. Who are the Orioles playing? The bottom of the barrel in the National League in Miami, and they've lost the opening 2 games of the series 6-3. Baltimore, wake up, please, will ya? Meanwhile, a change in the American League West. The Astros a 1-game lead, now the third best price to win the American League pennant at 6-1. The Mariners are struggling. They were 11 games above 500 on June 22nd, 45-34. They have lost 17 of their last 25, including being swept by the Angels in the midweek. Now 16-1, the Astros in first. We'll talk more Yankees with John Yastrzemski later on in our third hour. But just to paint the picture of where the Yankees have been from a pennant price all year long, opening day, second best number, actually some market moving against them because of the injury uncertainty around Garrett Cole in spring training. But after they swept the Astros in that opening 4-game set, they pretty much became the favorites to win the American League pennant and have held strong there despite the struggles since the middle of June. Hour number 3 starts after the break, live right here on TEL.